Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. And of course, Azu, thank you very much for joining us today. I see there's still people coming in, but I think we should start. Before we start, I will introduce our great guest, Azu Nwagbogu. He's an internationally acclaimed curator interested in evolving new models of engagement with questions of decolonization, restitution, and repatriation. And he founded the AFF, the African Artists Foundation, which is a nonprofit organization based in Lagos, Nigeria. And the foundation aims to promote art in Africa through organizing art exhibitions, festivals, competitions, residencies, and workshops. But I guess most of us know Azu as the founder and the director of LagosPhoto Festival, an annual international arts festival of photography that brings leading local and international photographers together in dialogue. Welcome, Azu. Thanks so much for being here with us.
Thank you, Ilvy. Thank you, Seven. Thank you, Heleen. Thank you, everyone, for being here. I really appreciate you taking the time to join us in this session tonight, this evening.
Thank you. And I think Heleen probably also already mentioned it, but everyone feel free to put your questions in the Q&A box. We will get to them. Please don't put them in the chat because they will get lost. So yeah, Azu, please, could you begin by explaining and telling kind of how your career started and how the start of your career, what it looked like?
Oh, thank you. My career within the world of curation, or art curation and photography, really started from early childhood. My family, my siblings really sharpened my interest and then became a passion and obsession. And I think that if you're going to succeed in anything, and when I say succeed, I mean be happy with what you do. You have to really find your passion and stay with it. And I was fortunate to find mine and to understand the power of art and the power of photography as a definitive medium of our age and what it can do to change perceptions, to tell stories in its simplicity, in its democracy, and its immediacy, and also in its ability to endure time. Photography has that quality. So yeah, it's sort of something that fell on my lap, but the truth is it started with passion and family and a lot of chance, as you all know. Chance plays a big hand in this.
So when you were growing up, were you surrounded by beautiful imagery, or did it come to you in a different way? Or are you from a very artistic family?
It came to me through poetry and literature, that's true. And that was my foray into visual culture. It started really with the written word. It said in the beginning was the word. So for me, it was exactly the same. The word was able to create that space for the visual intelligence, if you like, or the visual imagination to begin to imagine these scenarios to travel. So you could travel across time just through the word. And then that sparked a curiosity for image making, or for photography, and for, the question for truth. And, the photography have that wonderful paradox. All great truths have that wonderful paradox where in one way, it represents one thing, and it also represents the exact opposite. So photography have the legend of being evidential, if you like, right? But also through that, paradoxically, it had also been able to create the biggest lies, the biggest role in propaganda, the biggest role in colonialism, the biggest role in subjugation. And so it can also, every tool can be misused and used. So I think that is a thing that really I embrace, and I always look for those paradoxes in my practice, and I always embrace those paradoxes because it tells you that there's a truth within that paradox.
Yeah, I think that makes it very strong, our industry. I can also imagine being from, or no, kind of having this creative obsession. It led you in a very specific route to curatorship. I don't know if that's a word. It is, right?
Yeah.
But the photography world is very broad. How did you specifically, I don't know, maybe that's too difficult to explain, but specifically
good
towards curating?
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting question because I think, you know, we have a lot of ideas around curating today, but not a lot of honest conversations around it. So a lot of people call themselves curators, and I'm sure they are, and I'm not taking anything away from them, but I suppose it means different things to different people. But for me, it's really about having a voice and trying to be a bit like an earthworm. Like, you know, the earthworm is the one animal that does the most important work and no one thinks it, you know? You go in the ground and you make the soil arable for the plants to grow. It's really not about the earthworm. They really sacrifice themselves and they really do that tilling underneath. No one really sees the work that's done. I always think of curating as that. So for me, it's so important to understand, to pay attention to all of the issues that are going on in the world, in the contemporary world, and to find and develop concepts and to pay attention to what photographers, artists, the writers, scientists, what the world is saying, and to try to bring it into a space to make sense. So to give it visual language, if you like, or to give it any sort of language. So that's really the challenge, the task of curating. And many years ago, the term really did not exist. There was a stuffy museum term that meant sort of custodianship, but now it really has an agency of its own. So like, I think it's a bit like being a chiropractor. You can meet 200 people and only one person really would be able to help you as a chiropractor. So they're not, yeah, it's one of the weird things. Everyone seems to have an idea or wear that label, but it's such a specialized, I always think of it as something that, you know, it's almost like being an artist, but not quite. So yeah, it's interesting.
I think it is being an artist too. It's an artistic view, like shape-shifting the visuals of artists and putting it into perspective.
Yeah, we wouldn't have a job without the artists. The artists are really the key to, you know, and I remember when I started LagosPhoto Festival in 2010, and we had an exhibition with photojournalists. We had World Press Photo the next year or 2 years later, but we also had artists from that were working in portraiture and fine art. And people said, "Oh, no, I've never seen this before. This is really weird." You know, people, you either go to Papillon or you go to Owl, or, you know, and I said, well, I don't really believe in that. I believe that, you know, given the context of the brief for this conversation at 7, I remember when I read it, I thought it was really interesting because it was about going back to the hardcore roots of photojournalism and visual storytelling, because in a world today that is really confounded by the duality and the paradox of everyone can publish and everyone tells their own story. And so there is this confusion about what journalism is today. But in a sense, that paradox is not uncomplicated by simplifying photography to photo documentary. You know, if you think about it throughout history, the way we learn about people like those major events that really shaped the contemporary world today, like the First World War, which was a significant moment, is not through photojournalism or through the work of journalists, really. It's through works of writers, fiction. And, you know, the faithful writers who go around really documenting certain aspects and fictionalizing certain aspects, you find a lot of truth in that paradox, right? Or you talk about maybe the first, you know, writer journalist, maybe in literature, like Tolstoy, when he wrote about the Crimean War in his Sebastopol stories. You know, one of the most incredible collection of stories that you'll ever read. It's just so brilliantly written, where he described a man dying and all of the little psychological nuances of that period. You know, you really begin to understand what it was like to be alive at that time. And it's hard to get that truth within a sort of, this is what happened, because the tools really didn't exist at the time. So I think that the challenge that we have is a bit like trusting that we as human beings have evolved an advanced sense of self that allows us to really be able to understand the truth when we see it. And it's almost like we need to switch off all the commentary from the outside and begin to just learn to look. And by through looking, we will know the truth because we will sort of feel it, you know, and through a sort of Socratic approach where you ask yourself certain questions, you will know it's when you see it. Because, you know, today, you know, if people bring evidence, as you know, with the American forerunner for the presidential ticket in a few years, there's all sorts of evidence about criminality, but the faithful believe what they believe. And so, so it's not enough to present facts. You know, facts are not enough. There's a great line from another great writer who I love. He says, the truth is not enough. The truth is only a core of a totality that is inexhaustible. You know, the totality keeps expanding. So presenting the truth needs to be, needs a little bit more dialogue, a little bit of nuance, a little bit more of the opposite, the paradox, to allow both sides to have a conversation.
There can be many versions of one truth.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
You began the Lagos Photo Festival in 2010. That's already 14 years ago, almost. Do you think in your approach and with the current state of photography and documentary photography, photojournalism today, has it also changed the way you approach the festival?
Completely, you know, completely. This is the thing I'm always amazed about when people say, give themselves labels and say, this is what we do, and they stick to it. You know, those identities become a label that become a prison for yourself. We're constantly evolving and expanding what we know and how we exist in the world. So when we started Lagos Photo Festival, the passion and the fire that was in all of our bellies at the time was to push back against Afro-pessimism. That is the way, and a lot of people today will forget, but 15 years ago, 20 years ago and beyond, the way Africa was represented, the way Blackness was represented was always through a sort of pejorative of death, disease, displacement, poverty, and all of those terrible, there was no nuance to it. There was no idea of these are people with a soul, with love, families, with, it was always one-dimensional. And then if you approach people to say, oh yeah, we want to present the evidence because we want to create solutions. But you can never find a solution when people are sort of dehumanized in this way. And so that was the first thing we tried to do. We weren't trying to fight propaganda with propaganda. Rather, we wanted to present stories by, and we wanted to show that it wasn't only locals who were anti this Afro-pessimistic view, but there were photographers from the Netherlands, from Paris, from the US, from China, who have embraced this sensibility, but we wanted to keep that a space as well. So we didn't want to sort of create a space for only African photographers. We wanted to keep them in dialogue with others. And I think that formula really worked. And I think for the first 4 or 5 editions, we were really focused on redressing this. And then with the explosion of social media and with the success that we believe that we also achieved in redressing and showing that you can be successful presenting the continent in this way, we stopped caring about this sort of the way we were represented, because that already took care of itself. And we started creating a more calibrated approach that dealt with the way we relate to each other, aspiration, goals, you know, and, you know, so the festival evolved in that we didn't stay doing the same thing. And we always had that hybrid of having photojournalists and documentary photographers, and always showing what that was maybe staged. I remember one great edition called Staging Reality, Documenting Fiction. And I thought that, again, that paradox that I love really was able to make us think about the image and what it means in the 21st century.
So true. Maybe now is also a good moment. You have prepared a presentation for us tonight. Maybe now is a
Sure.
good moment to have a look at some of the work you would like to share with us. You could share your screen.
Thank you. I really like this work, completely staged. This is one of the a photographer who works completely in the world of fashion and actually more like commercial photography, right? And Osborne Macharia. And Osborne, when I discovered his work and I met with him, he's the only commercial or only photographer I've ever met who says to me, well, I don't understand why everyone is so obsessed with my work. I really just want to do my commercial things and focus on my studio work. And I thought it was hilarious that this guy is so talented and is able to tell great stories and make great portraits and, you know, do incredible work and is sought after. But he didn't really understand how much depth and breadth there was to what he could achieve as a photographer and as an artist. And you know, he wanted to just focus on being the studio guy that people coming and want to do studio shots. And I remember there's an artist, a photographer, Peter Hugo, who had come to Lagos and did a story called Hollywood. And I believe titles are really important, right? Titles really give you, set the parameter. You know, if I tell you I'm going to make a spoon and I make a beautiful fork, well, it's not a spoon, you know.
Makes it confusing. Yeah.
It's makes it so Peter Hugo made this body of work that everyone really loved and everyone was going on and on. I didn't like the work at all. I thought it was first of all, the title wasn't apt, it was misleading, it wasn't interesting, it was very, for me, uber commercial. And I thought, well, you know, in my usual sort of way, what do you do about it? And I thought, I'm going to get the guy who's doing the same commercial style work in a way, but I consider to be an artist, to come in and to redress that narrative and to talk about, because people will go focus on some of these, you know, in Lagos back in the day, there were these hyena men walking around the street with live hyenas in traffic. I remember going up to it. Now you don't see it anymore, but walking around the street with a hyena on a chain and like a pet. And so Peter came, documented it, and did this thing called Hollywood. And so I invited Osborne to come to Lagos and he also didn't like that body of work by Peter. And he came in and I said, okay, well, let's do something about it. So we brought him in, we got the hyena from the hyena men. We paid and did all the permissions. And we wanted to talk about ecology and use it to talk about a loss of green space in urban regeneration that is, you know, rampant all over the cities in Africa. And I just love that idea of using the problem to find a solution.
I love that.
We talked about LagosPhoto Festival already, but I'd like to talk just a few minutes about the power of using the medium of photography to deal with the most urgent contemporary issues. And I'm sure everyone in this room has had a conversation about restitution, repatriation, stolen, looted objects in museums, you know, that are in the British Museum, in museums in Germany, in museums all over the world. Benin bronzes are the famous subjects. And when I was researching this topic, you know, because I have a bias in photography as a contemporary art curator, I thought, how do you use the medium and the urgency of photography to spark a civic intelligence among citizens, not just in Africa, but all over the world? And so for the 11th edition of LagosPhoto Festival, after we had done some research, we came up with this term called rapid response restitution. And it was really playing on the the rapid click of a camera, you know, trying to use it as a sort of metaphor to think about how we can embrace the urgency of photography and use it to tell the sort of story, and to also share and democratize the consciousness and the need for care for heritage among citizens. And so I invited a curator, Dr. Clementine Delis, who's pictured there, who was the director of a museum in an ethnographic museum in Frankfurt, one of the few ethnographic museums that that sort of had a bit of transparency in opening up their collections in her time there. And so she invited a lot of diverse creatives, artists, musicians, songwriters, authors, you know, fashion designers, to look at the objects in the collection and to find meaning within those ideas. So I thought it would be interesting to invite her to join me as I did field research with my team, traveling across the museums all over Nigeria to think about restitution as an idea. And these are some of the images, you know, and then these are the images that you don't really see in the media. That's a fish trap, right? That the ingenuity of our forebears, they'd use this fish trap to farm ecologically, right? To fish ecologically. And they use a convection current, like swooshing the trap in the river, and the fish will just gravitate towards it by convection current, and that's it. So they always had something to eat. There was never a lack of food. That's another fish trap right there. And then we began to think about, how do we share our excitement? How do we get other people thinking about it and getting excited about it? Because a lot of people were not excited. Citizens were not excited about the Benin bronzes and all the sort of celebrated objects that were looted by stone soldiers. So we designed a project called the Home Museum, whereby we asked citizens to send in between 6 and 12 objects. Anyone can do this, of objects in your home that you could not, that you need to feel at home, to feel like it's safe.
Oh,
Objects
that is a beautiful idea.
Sentimental values.
absolute
Yes.
sentimental
Ah,
value. So if I said, Ilvy, we're going to go to Japan and you don't need to worry about money or clothes, we're going to do all the shopping over there, just bring 6 to 12
Bring-
objects. It will completely allow you feel like if living in, you know,
in the
Kyoto, that you
Netherlands at
are.
home. Yeah,
What are
but
the,
bring a bit of
what are
home
the,
with you.
yeah, and that's exactly, and people really gravitate
Interesting.
towards it. They made short videos telling us why they chose this reading glasses that the grandfather gave to them, or a pair of shoes, or sunglasses, or a bar of soap that the great grandmother passed on. It was such an incredible. I said, well, this is what heritage is about. This is what, well, this is why heritage matters. It's not about just shiny objects in the museum. It's really truly about those objects that you can use to create your own sense of cosmogony. And this is what photography can do. It democratizes something that is so, that, you know, that is up there, that is about relic diplomacy that happens between states. And it really brought it to the state where we could really have a conversation. And the website is www.homemuseum.net. And you can actually build your own collection and listen to the conversation of the, I mean, this is also another one. This one, I think the respondent with this image talked about a song that he associates with this image. And so anywhere he goes and he sees this fan, he'd feel at home. Can you imagine? You know, so that tells you how heritage works and how photography can accelerate that conversation. I'll quickly talk a little bit about a project that I'm really super excited about that we launched 2 years ago, called Dig Where You Stand, From Coast to Coast. And this is also another way of thinking about, how do we create, you know, a real connection across the continent? What's the, sorry about that, it's going to completely come on in a sec. What's the language that we can deploy to embrace this journey across the continent by engaging other art spaces, other museums, other institutions, other people that are thinking about connecting histories and heritage And so we thought there are 26 coastal regions across Africa that have what we call a point of no return. That is to say, the connection between Africa and Europe or the rest of the world, where enslaved people could never come back, right? Where slaves were shipped. And I thought it would be wonderful to think about a way of not just repatriation in terms of objects, but repatriation in terms of knowledge, right? And so Digweistan became that mode of engagement. So if you look at the map of Africa, there are these 26 coastal regions that traverse Africa and the rest of the world. And we've designed this project to really connect that. And for me, very significantly, it's a way of training the younger generation of curators. So, you know, we talked about it before we started. How do we pass on that skill, that experience to the next generation of thinkers, but not in a gimmicky way, but through really getting your hands dirty and doing the work itself, the hardcore work itself. So this is, and the model that we shipped, we started in Ghana. So we get a cohort of artists usually, because there's no real curatorial training in a lot of these, you know, in Africa in general. And so we get a bunch of artists who already have an inclination about what we're doing and what is the importance of it. And or photographers and people that are or writers, people that are inclined. So when we launched the exhibition, which, you know, a concept that I developed in Accra, in Ghana, in Tamale rather, the respondents, the artists and those who attended the workshop, we selected one person from that group to curate the next iteration. And the next iteration happened in Lomé in Togo. And in Lomé in Togo, we do the same thing and we get a young artist to curate the next iteration, which will happen in Abidjan, in Benin, sorry, the Republic of Benin. And from there, we get the next iteration, just like that. That way, it's not about this curator doing all of this work, but it's about creating a chain, a relay that really passes on knowledge and deploying the same tools to think about this reality. These are some of the artworks that embody the project. In this dub ship, this spaceship, there's a full console with a computer, and we're going to get the Apple Vision Pro thing in there, so you can really feel like if you're flying a spaceship and you're traveling across these.
Amazing. That is
Yeah.
amazing.
So
there's a lot of mixing of photography
there's a
with
lot of mixing of photography. This is Zanelli Maholi's work.
I love her work.
Kadieva Lohausen's Diamond Matters. Actually, I realize I'm sharing the wrong slide because this is the old one. Can I prepare the slide that was exclusive to
Yes, feel
to
free.
the medium of photojournalism? Just give me a second, I'll pull it up. I'll get there in a minute.
Although it was interesting to see as well that you mix so much of photography and but yeah, feel free to share the other one.
This is it right here. The great stand. Tamale.
While we wait for the other slides, a good moment to remind everybody in the audience that if you have any questions, please drop them in the Q&A box below, and then we will get to them later in this presentation.
In each image, there is that engagement, there is that eye-level contact, there is that feeling that this is someone who's engaged with the story. He feels he's there. He's not shooting this image, for example. I really love this photo because he's a super tall guy, right? 6'7". But
Yeah, he's super tall.
He's squatting to get the shot, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
And then they end with this picture of a decadent party with naked sushi in New York with the lady with all the diamond, without a care for how we got there, right?
Yeah.
And this is how you tell the story with nuance. So that when we're thinking of intervention, we're thinking of solutions. You don't just lay the blame on the most disenfranchised in society. You can find where we can roll different points of intervention where we can find solutions. And not to be outdone, this is the work by Akintunde Akinyele, and he talks about, you know, the refined sand that these guys go into the lagoons to fetch in Lagos. And this, all of the cities, all of the buildings that are in Lagos really depend on that particular fine sand that you get by diving deep into the sea. And these guys are like superhuman. They get in there, they hold their breath for unbelievable amounts of time to find this fine sand and to bring the story and to bring this thing to us. I found another wonderful project by Dana Luxembourg, how you can tell the story of a community, Imperial Court, using portraits, how portraiture becomes a very powerful tool of storytelling. And I'll just end there and stop sharing my screen so that we can quickly get to questions and engage with the audience.
Did any questions come in, or is everyone being shy? Thank you for sharing, Azu.
We have one question or two questions. No, they're coming in now. Let's see. One question by Jane Carrero. I hope I'm pronouncing your name right. The idea of creating a curatorial chain is fantastic. Democratizes and demystifies the idea of curating art. Much needed not only in African, but in any culture dealing with post-colonialism. So not really a question, but a remark.
Thank you, Heleen. Thank you, Heleen. I really appreciate your response. And I believe that the antidote to the problem is really sharing, is really being kind, because the colonial approach has always been about, oh, Azu, you're so special or so brilliant or so whatever, and then they put you up there to be a sentinel that keeps others out. But when we change this or have this awareness to change this sort of mindset to create the space for others to coming and to really do the important work that we need to be doing, we can break down and syncopate those powers and create more nuance and multiple parts to engage. That's really what I think is important.
Yeah.
There's another. Oh, sorry, Helen.
Sorry.
No, go.
We have another question that came in from Bora Un. They say it would be great to learn more about how you think about the impact and reach. In particular, is there a specific audience you are hoping to reach? Does this shape your programming and exhibitions or interventions?
It's a really good question. I mean, in my work, the context always varies. So I have an exhibition that opened in the Museum of World Cultures in the Netherlands, and that's a very specific idea. It's an ethnographic museum. It's a museum that it's seen today to be highly problematic, but they invited me to engage with the collection and the history of the collection. I said, oh, I love this idea. I love the challenge, and I'm going to find a way to, celebrate, not only celebrate, but also to find an intelligence within the collection and also to animate it with the work of contemporary artists that are thinking along the same lines. So obviously, as you know, I had a guy like John Henry, with a beautiful, what's it called? Something fruit. I'm blanking out on the title. It's from it's just an incredible, beautiful sort of Pieta reference image of African American mothers holding their sons in this sort of like Pieta-like space, and with the backdrop of the landscape of America. So it really has this power of making you think about, the violence against Black bodies, and the fact that mothers and women are the chronic sufferers of that. They live with the pain, and they pass that trauma to the next generation. And so that is something that, is not often spoken about. So I think in that context, I'm juxtaposing these ideas and creating this space for us to think about the new ethnography and the new way of thinking about the new way to other people in the 21st century, if you like. And so my audience is sort of totally different when I'm hosting an exhibition in Lagos, or when I'm hosting an exhibition in Venice, for example, where I have a big exhibition opening for the Benin Pavilion in for April 2024. So constantly thinking about the audience is important, but that's not the most important thing. You know, you have to think about the context of what you're trying to do primarily, and then the audience comes as a sort of almost afterthought, if you like.
Maybe
We
I'll go for it, Ilvy.
No, I would say we talked a little bit about it in the beginning, but speaking about audience, the audience is of course changing. I think, let's say at least the younger audience is changing towards seeing a lot of photography on their screens instead of maybe in art spaces. Does that also change the way you curate? Do you, well, maybe since COVID even more so, but do you do a lot of online? Does it change the way you tell your stories through curation?
I think, you know, we have to really embrace, I believe that we have to get in there early. So whatever, and don't worry about if it's going to succeed or not. You know, I think whatever tools are out there, try and get in there early. Because if you don't, you know, the so-called, you know, the other side of the story, the duality that I speak about will get in there before you and will dominate that space. Then it's an uphill battle to create that mutual engagement that we are always keen on. So I think that the online space, it's the reason I'm doing this talk, is because I love the fact that, you know, I can be in Lagos where I am right now, and I can speak to yourself and people in Amsterdam, in China, wherever in the world people are dialing in from, and we can have a wonderful conversation about, you know, the work that we all do. So I think it's important to embrace it and to lean into it.
I think Heleen was about to say that. Maybe we should move on to kind of the second part, which is a bit more practical. I'm not sure if she was going to say that, but maybe she was.
You are reading my mind, Ilvy.
I was trying all the way from here. Because I know there's a lot of, especially photographers watching, Azu, who would really like to know how to, for instance, get into a festival like Lagos. So when you are curating, do you, for instance, work a lot with people who are proposing projects to you, or are you on the lookout for work in other ways? And if you do want to receive proposals, what should they look like?
I do love receiving proposals. I mean, I always say this when I'm in these situations where I say, well, curators, editors, festival organizers, it's in our interest to find you guys, to find the artists, the photographers. It's what we want, the best. You know, it's not a favor, it's not a gift. We're not doing anyone any favors. We really depend on you guys sharing work with us. We're so grateful to receive it. Of course, sometimes we're busy and we have a lot on, but I try as much as I can in between spaces on flights to look at work. I do a lot of portfolio reviews, and I think it's a wonderful, and I have all the varied work, and I keep categories, you know, around what people are thinking of, and I really keeps me fresh, and it keeps me sort of sharp about what's going on out there. So I love receiving proposals, but the way I curate and the way I work specifically when I'm developing an idea for like the festival or thematic is always based on what I feel is the most relevant conversation that we should be having today. So when we did rapid response restitution, that was the peak of the conversational restitution, and we really wanted to use immediacy of photography to think about it. Right now, I'm obsessed with the idea of incarceration. So I'm thinking about, you know, the fact that not just incarceration in terms of the criminal justice system, but incarceration in terms of the way we limit ourselves with identity, the way we build structures that keep other people out and keep ourselves locked in, incarceration of the mind, with all of these sort of gender identity, all of these four roles of incarceration, even the idea of living in a gilded cage of being a super wealthy athlete who does not use your voice to share good because you're scared you're going to lose your contracts or all of those forms of incarceration I'm interested in. And the fact that, you know, one country with all of the hundreds of countries in the world, is responsible for a quarter of the incarcerated people on the planet. This is outstanding to me, that we can have a business of incarceration, and that is okay in a civilized nation. So I'm interested in really working hard to, you can talk about, Gaza, for example, or they call it the biggest open prison in the world. There's so many conversations we can have around incarceration. Even, yeah, I can get it. I can geek out on it, but the key thing is it's a theme that I'm thinking about, and I'm eager to embrace, and I'm eager to get diverse voices, and I'm looking out for artists that are working in this mode or working with people who've been previously incarcerated. It's not that because we have a theme that everything that has that idea fits into it. No, we create archetypes and we create typology, if you like, that fit into a certain curatorial perspective, and we try and bake a cake with it. So, yeah.
So let's say when you have a theme, which by the way is super interesting to me, I was at one of your beautiful lectures recently in Los Angeles at National Geographic, and you were speaking about this too. And I remember just like almost standing up, clapping, because it's an amazing theme to me. But I can imagine, or I wonder actually, if you have a theme that's this broad, how do you then look at proposals? Do you, for instance, of course, you're now saying in this call, okay, I'm working on this theme. People might be watching and thinking, oh, I want to send in something to Azu. Should that be a proposal in a PDF, or it's so broad? You are the mastermind of this idea, and I can imagine people are watching thinking, how do I fit into this theme?
And I don't think people should worry about fitting the idea into the theme. If you have great work you've made with conviction, just share it. And if you think it has a flavor of the theme, share it. You don't need to change your concept to fit in. The curator's job, I believe, is to find meaning within work. Work doesn't have to have one didactism. It doesn't have to be one narrative or one approach or one. I can just, for example, I can look at an archival body of work around, say, the Great Leap Forward or the Cultural Revolution. I'm just thinking of work that I've seen recently, and I thought it was fantastic, incredible work. We're thinking about the period of China between 1956 and 1976, right? Where they had two major catastrophes, right? And nobody could leave the country. You were really incarcerated in that nation. For me, as a curator, if I have work around that period, and you don't need to tell me anything about incarceration, and I'm interested in the work, and I think the work is done with conviction and it's really well done, then I'm able to show how it fits within my theme. That's not for the artist to worry about. So the artist doesn't need to do a song and dance. I will do that, and shape it into this narrative. And without contaminating the authenticity of the work of the artist, I'm not changing anything. I'm just saying, look, if you think about when this nation, or when Chairman Mao, for example, dropped the big character poster in 1966, that's when the Beatles released the album Revolver, right? So think about one country thinking about freedom in this way and dancing and having all the stuff, and another country is creating a big cultural revolution. Well, it's not revolution. It's actually a cage that they're creating for the people. So I love all of these approaches to curating and presenting history in this way that is, that makes people think. I love it.
Great. Shall we? Yeah, I have more questions on my list, but I see there's also questions coming in. Heleen, what shall we do? What is?
Let's do one more question from somebody coming in, and then do one of yours. And maybe a good reminder for everyone who still has questions, best to drop them in now, and then we will try to answer them afterwards. Maybe I'll read the next question of Jeremy Digabu. He asks, what do you think is the next phase for photojournalism and documentary photography, especially with all the crazy introduction of AI and ChatGPT?
It's a great question. I think that we are beginning to see what it's like anyway, in terms of we're living in that moment right now. and everybody, I was at a lecture with Fred Richens. I invited Fred to a space that I was working at in Amsterdam to give a talk. And Fred spoke about the risk of AI, and it was all doom and gloom. And I said, well, we've been here before, you know. At the end, the beautiful thing about existing as humans on Earth is that we are humans on Earth, you know. We will never be anything other than that. And there's always going to be a premium on that. And so we've seen AI, we've seen AI in action, we've seen ChatGPT in action, we've seen, I can actually tell you now when I read a text, you know, for as a curator, I know exactly when it's ChatGPT. It's funny, you know. So after a while, our brains calibrate themselves to be able to read and to see the glitches in these things. And so whether it's AI, whether it's ChatGPT, I'm not really too worried about it. I think we should, as much as possible, try and embrace it. But the storyteller is always going to be a storyteller. You're always going to have that authenticity of authorship and mastery of what you're trying to say as an artist or a photographer or a photojournalist. And obviously, the institutions that present an idea of truth have a responsibility to create ethics and codes to control this. And I see a lot of institutions are talking about it, and a lot of media houses are talking about it. And I instituted and created that, those guidelines. And the software is also being developed, although it will always be one step behind the software that creates and improves the quality of the AI.
Because the role of the author is more important than ever.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And the author that is, you know, super literate will always be different to the author that is a dabbler, that is a dilettante, that is just, you know, oh, I need to curate a show about incarceration, give me ideas. You know, you were never going to have those lateral, up, down, sideways thinking that that an original thinker will have, you know, even with the technology. It will never happen. And you will never be nimble enough of their thought and have the sensibility enough to read the subtlety like someone who's generating these ideas authentically. That's just my view. Ilvy, you're muted. Ilvy, you're muted.
I'm sorry about that. I said beautifully said, and it also made me wonder, you named a few things, but if you would have to summarize it, what makes photographers stand out for you? And where do you actually look for them in case people are not sending you proposals? Where do you look? Do you look on Instagram, at festivals? Where do you go?
I find that I do a lot of jury work, and I almost have to all of them. That's secretly, you know, just between you and all of us here. That's the reason I do it, because I really love finding the work of people that I haven't thought of in those spaces. It's not so much, if I'm honest, I don't really find that it helps me at all. As a secondary help, it does. So if I'm in a jury or in a portfolio review, I'll check to see, okay, what is this person sharing on there? But it's not the primary source for me at all. So yeah, portfolio reviews, a lot of the, you know, the juries that I'm at, I really take them very seriously.
I'm very happy to hear that part about the jury, because I always tell my students who are usually and young photographers who are starting out in the industry, I always tell them, please send in to awards. And they always tell me, but I probably won't win. I'm like, if you don't send in, you'll never win. And also the jury members will be seeing your work also if you don't win. And they usually are like, well, I'm not sure. But this makes me happy that it's actually that I'm talking the truth to them, that it could help in the background too, right?
It really does help. It really does help. It really does help.
That's good to hear. Heleen, do you want to go to Ted's question?
Yeah, we have one last question from Ted Ostrowski. I really hope I am pronouncing this okay. Apologies.
Who, by the way, is always here at VII Insider, which thank you, Ted. He's literally almost always here. So that's great. Okay, that's a side note. Thanks.
He says, your presentation jogged my mind to the work of Marcus Blasdale, a bankrupt photographer, and the other end of the visual arts is Roger Balle. Both of these accomplished photographers are not natives to Africa. However, Balle seems to have made his home in South Africa. Does curation need to focus on native Africans, or is a hybrid of multinationals important to tell a story?
I think that's it's something that I'm happy to talk about, but I think that there's an idea that Africa I mean, for me, it's so important that we, rather than worry about the reductionist approach of is this person black or is this person white? Roger Ballon is actually a South African, and he's born there. He spent most of his life there. He's African, you know, that he's not black or dark skinned, does not mean he's an African. And I know I'm being also very simplistic in my answer, but it's so important that because I say this to a lot of the activists who are champions for diversity, and I'm completely interested in that, and I'm all for it. I say, what does utopia look like? Let's say we've achieved complete total success with what we're doing in terms of diversity. What does that look like? Does that look like a world where all the roles are women and black and queer? Or what does it look like? No, it's about creating a balance. A guy like Roger Ballon, who's created and lived and have a school in South Africa. I know Roger a little bit, not too well. I know he's contributing a lot to the community, and he lives there and he's committed to it. Why not? There are photographers like VII Insider who spent 10 years or 11 years of our early childhood growing up in Uganda. How many Africans or black people, dark-skinned people living in Europe have lived for 11 years in Africa? So, these are strange notions that we are, of course, I understand that we need to understand that there's a history of subjugation and abuse and exploitation that we need to address. But we should also not throw the baby away with the bathwater. We should really, not be reductionist in our approach to deal with the issue of diversity.
Do you feel this time is about rebalancing in some way then?
I understand that, the pendulum needs to swing a little bit. I understand that that's sort of a natural reaction, but I think always, even in that swing, I'm always interested in making sure that when it swings back, there's a rhythm to it. There's the oscillation that is balanced, so that we are better off for it. It's not about, for me, if I think about it in a very puristic sense, oftentimes the work is not about you, right? You're almost like a vessel transmitting something that is higher. So when you're making really important, great work, sometimes, I've talked like a dear about diamond matters, and we're like, wow, that's so incredible. And we're like, yeah. And he's also a surprise himself. He's also looking back and saying, wow, I did that. It's almost like you're in spirit, you're in the zone. You are completely obsessed, and that comes and it goes. And sometimes you don't know if it's going to come back, right? When you make great, great, great work, it's not really about you. You're just a messenger. And that's what I think. And if we celebrate the work, and in the capitalist world that we live in, people are always obsessed about the messenger rather than the message. If we really celebrate the work itself and stay with the work, we should be concerned obviously about the origins, but it's not a primary consideration. We should first look and see, is this work made with conviction, with empathy, with care, with consideration, with respect, with ethics? And then you'll find that the works that you like and that gravitate and fit all of those ideas are often made by people who are super emotionally invested in that scenario.
Yeah, that's very true. It's a very current discussion, of course, in photojournalism, but also in the art world. It's, I think, one of the main discussions now. So it's interesting to hear your vision on it. Very interesting. Ted added to this in the Q&A that here in Canada, at least, cultural appropriation is an issue, which frankly, I do not understand. It's more of a remark than a question, I guess.
Culture belongs to everybody. No one owns culture. Culture is for humanity.
Can we do one more question? We're running out of time a bit. Do you have time for one more question? Would that be okay with you, Azu?
Yeah.
You're good. Okay, you're good. So as said before, I know there's many people watching who just want to know in general, also your personal view, but maybe you know a more general answer as well, how photographers should approach curators. You like to receive proposals. Maybe you even want to share how you like to receive them, because I know there's photographers watching who would really like to know what are the do's and don'ts, basically. Should they email you? Do you want to share your email address? That's one of the things we always ask.
I'd be happy to share my
lovely.
I'm happy to receive. One thing that I really think is important is for photographers to be as organized as possible. Try and get your work, in a certain order. Don't worry too much about the edit. If you make it an edit that you like, but try and keep a certain order in your body of work, and be very clear about what you're trying to achieve, because not to use the word, but we look at the work or understand the work based on the parameters that you set for yourself. So if we're looking at staged work, and then it's not clear that it's a stage and it's photojournalistic work, then it becomes very confusing to know how to judge the work or how to look at the work. So try and, as much as possible, tell us, especially within the journalistic documentary sense, what your intentions are or what your approach is. And then you say, well, this body of work, it's all staged, this is all portraits. I want to tell the story through portraiture and through, I asked them to do this, and this was what I was trying to get at. Completely fine. But as much as you can, within the idea of photojournalism and documentary photography, declare your intentions. And then if you make artwork, then it's what you call it, it's fine. But I think we love it when they make it easy for us to look and read the work. And then we love to see work. So please do share. I'm excited to receive work. And if you send an email and you don't get a response, send another one. A reminder after a few days. Don't you worry. We are all, slaves to this. The terrorize. We will get that. That's right.
I love.
You should.
I love that you get to the emails, though. That's also that's not the norm. I know that from the other side of the industry. It's not always. You don't always get a response, right? Yeah, so that's great.
You should persist. I think also, you can approach on Instagram or anywhere you feel like if you might be able to get the attention of this editor or this curator, because honestly, it's in our interest to find new voices. I'm excited about this artist I told you about, a photographer. Well, I discovered it because someone called me and said, oh, there's this exhibition, you might like it. I know you're interested in this period of Chinese history. I said, sure. And I got in my car and I went out there. Literally like that. Just I had enough clues to go to see it. Now I'm in touch with the photographer all the time. So it's not a favor, it's not a gift. I'm not doing any sort of charity to anyone in this regard. It's really truly my job, what I love doing and what I enjoy.
Thank you for sharing all of this, Azu. My reception broke off for 1 second, so I'm not sure if you shared your email address already, but if you did, because I know we're getting, I've been getting a lot of responses after doing this VII Insider. We do this similar episode for editors of magazines and newspapers, and photographers often reach out to us afterwards saying, oh, great, they actually shared their email address. I feel like one step closer to getting my story out there. So it's very important to people watching. So thanks so much for being so open about that and sharing your address.
I'll share it right
Guys, it's in the chat. There we go. yeah, I really, really loved this conversation. I wish we could go on for much longer, very much longer. But yeah, we just want to thank you for sharing all your knowledge and for sharing these beautiful slides that you prepared. It was also very inspirational. And of course, I hope to
Absolutely.
bump into you into the real photo world. I also like online, but it's always a pleasure meeting you too.
Thank you.
And thanks for everyone who watched tonight.
For joining in. I appreciate you joining in. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Azu, for making the time for us, and best of
Yeah.
luck with your future show in Venice. We are very much looking forward to it. Please keep us up to date.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks, everyone. I think we will call it a night, and we hope to see you again. We have a next episode planned in about 2 weeks, and you'll read about it more on our website on VII Insider. Take care, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.